Well, today I have the privilege to be here surrounded by music. And we are going to have the pleasure to talk to and with one of the great masters of music in Vermont. But outside the boundaries, there is a lot of things that he knows that we are not able to know all of that. I'm speaking about the blues, the rock and roll, the flamenco. I'm learning more about Mr. Dennis Wilmots. I want to shake your hands now because it's a great pleasure and honor for me to have you in our TV show today.
Well, it's an honor for me to be here, and thank you for having me here.
Good. I think that we could take our time machine and go like 35 years ago about the music you began to play, how you began to play and learn the guitar, all the chords, all the songs of the blues, all the keys of that.
All right, let's do it. So we have to back up 58 years.
More than 35?
More than 35.
My goodness.
Yes, I just had my 72nd birthday yesterday. And I was raised in a family, I would say, that was heavily artistic. And my mother had been an actress when I was very small and was also quite a good singer, could sing operas from the, arias from operas. She sang blues to my brother and me when we were little. And
To cradle you?
to cradle us, and then as we were getting older. And of course, in the mid-1950s, along came Elvis Presley, Bill Haley and the Comets. Those people were, they were the result of all of the big bands sort of squeezing down at the end of World War II and using smaller combos. And the birth of the blues became the birth of rock and roll. Well, if you fast forward to, say, 1960, when I was 14 years old, the blues began to be really promoted throughout the folk music world. And I lived in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which was a center for the people who were touring. At that time, a man named Dick Waterman had been finding old blues musicians, getting them out of their jobs as elevator operators and janitors and train porters and sharecroppers, farmers, and bringing them around to the college campuses and centers, New York City, Philadelphia, Boston, Cambridge, San Francisco. And the result of that was that a lot of people who were in my age group, between 14 and 22, were getting a firsthand experience of these people who really invented the blues as we know it as solo artists. Delta blues, Piedmont blues with the finger picking, Texas style blues. I went many, many times as a teenager to see Lightning Hopkins, John Lee Hooker out of Detroit, but out of Mississippi. Lightning Hopkins was from Navasota, Texas, that area. Dallas, Houston. Mance Lipscomb, another very, very great, played slide and Piedmont style, the alternating thumb bass, along with the melody. And it was very intimate, so you couldn't hide from the essential feeling, alma, of the blues. Just couldn't do it. And that intimacy carried over, and as my friends and I began to play guitar, for me that was 1959-60, we wanted to emulate that feeling, and we worked hard at it. And in my particular case, it was a matter of doing my academic studies in high school or running the streets with my friends and playing guitar as much as we could. And the result was I became a guitar player. And high school was put on hold until 1988.
Well, I say yeah, everything gonna be alright. Ooh, now yes, now baby, everything gonna be alright. together, baby. Now we can make love, can't we? Come on, baby. Let me hold your worried hand. Ooh, now, baby. Let me hold your worried hand. I'm gonna do things with you, woman. I'll make you happy every day. Here I am now, people, locked up in love, love, love again. Oh, here I am, locked up in love again. When I'm looking for my baby, you know I can't find any friend. Come on, baby, let's make love tonight. Ooh, now come on, honey. Please, let's make love tonight. When we get together, baby, everything is gonna be alright.
And I was always a singer. So when we had to do little coffee house, shows, as teenagers, 17, 18 years old, I was the one who was always pushed forward. And I learned a bit about performing. I was, of course, a little bit nervous, a little bit terrified.
That always happens.
Yes. And along the way, I learned some flamenco badly, and then eventually, much later in life, that became part of my studies as well. And that's how I got involved in music.
Good.
So,
And the flamenco are also early trained musicians.
yeah. Well,
They
flamenco,
play,
yeah, like blues, is a folk form, and it's not really a music that's written out. It's a music that is passed from generation to generation and is deeply acculturated. There's an expression in Spain that they call it the flamenco mafia.
Mm-hmm.
So the Gitano culture from Madrid and Sevilla, those are the axes along which most of the flamenco people live. And fortunately for people like Paco de Lucia, flamenco became a world music. And today we were enriched by that music. At the same time, in Spain, blues has become a really, really big deal. And I have a very good friend, the fellow who gave me this Snake Eyes domino with Gatemouth Brown on it, was a harmonica player, very, very fine, who grew up in Essex Junction, now lives in Austin, Texas, and spends most of his summer touring Spain, Italy, the Netherlands, like that, Denmark. Very, very astute young man. He's about 40 now, so he's about
We can
young.
We can
We call
invite
him
him
young.
to come here too.
if he's rarely in Vermont anymore because his parents have moved down to Asheville, North Carolina. His name is Greg Izor, and he has stuff all over YouTube, and I recommend people listen to Greg Izor. He is highly respected by some of the top harmonica players now currently working in the blues. So, good man, very good man.
Beautiful.
Yes.
And we also had to add a little bit to the flamenco, that great concert of Paco de Lucia
Yes.
with John McLaughlin, Larry Correa at the beginning, and then Aldi Meola.
Yes.
And Chick Corea, who wrote the beautiful piece of Spain.
Yes. Yes.
That helped a lot.
They really, they kind of, when Paco became prominent, they got together, and I think it was some of the most financial success at that time that Paco had experienced. But Paco's puro flamenco, pure flamenco,
Pure, yeah.
is for me where it really lives. And so I appreciated his desire to understand the chords, the theory-based stuff that Dimiola and McLaughlin, Goriel, those guys are doing. He was able to absorb that like a sponge and put it into the palos of flamenco, the forms, profoundly,
Sure, yes.
Yep.
We are talking to Dennis Wilmot. He had a band named Let I Jump, and we are going to come back to continue talking to him. Thank you very much for watching our show.
Learn to love me or leave me. Either one you wanna do. Learn to love me or leave me. Either one you wanna do. You know the strange things are happening. I want nothing bad to happen to you. If you know you don't love me, then why don't you let me be? If you know you don't love me, why don't you let me be? You know I'm better off without you, honey, Lord, than to live on in this misery. Well, you know the midnight find me crying in The daylight find me crying too. You know the midnight find me crying. Daylight find me crying too. Crying too. You better straighten your way, baby, or something bad might happen to you. Well, a freight train run by my window. Hound dog barking in my back door. Freight train run by my window. Hound dog bark at my back door. You know I got a bottle of corn liquor here in the bed beside me. A loaded shotgun by my door. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Right.
Now, I'll say that my public appearances in the blues were put on hold for quite a number of years, and around 1990, my wife bought me an electric guitar. And it was one of these things.
That's a good wife, huh?
Well, we decided to go Christmas shopping for her, the Christmas of 1990. And we went to the University Mall in the center of Burlington, and she began spending money like I had never seen on herself. And I couldn't figure out what was going on because it was such an uncharacteristic way for her to behave. But I found out on Christmas morning, a few days later, she had brought this big box along with us, and when we drove down to Connecticut, and I unwrapped that present, and it was an electric guitar, and I thought, wow, does this take me back? All along I had been playing acoustic guitar, hadn't had an electric guitar for quite a long time, at least 25 years. So that was the beginning of me singing and playing locally. And at the time there was a blues society, and there were a lot of very fine musicians who had been working in rock bands and this and that, but their first love was blues. And so there would be jam sessions, and as that progressed over the next 2 years, I met and closed the deal with the musicians that I felt were the most simpatico, most with me,
nice people.
In the feeling of authentic, the roots of blues. And I began the band Left Eye Jump. Was actually named by the fellow who was the lead guitar player in my band at that time in the mid-90s. And his name is Dan Whale, and he's been a huge, powerful influence in my life, and still is. He moved to Massachusetts a couple of years later, and then Bill Darrow, lucky for me, Bill Darrow came along and said he would like to work, and he's wonderful. A great guitarist. He works with Joe Moore, one of my superstar musicians in the Joe Moore band, and then of course Joe Moore.
Yes, he can
Nowadays,
sing too.
he's got a lot of bands. He is extremely popular for a very good reason, and great saxophone player. And Kenny B I met quite early on. An amazing bass player. He creates a platform for my music, for my singing, my feel, for each one of those songs in a way that allows me to stand tall. And if I make a mistake, he's right there with this large sound and this dynamic. And he's animated the way I am. He's a thin, sort of moves about fellow.
The way he can.
And he can play. Oh yeah.
Wow.
And he's a guy who's worked in front of 20,000 people at once in big stadiums in Europe, working with Luther Guitar Jr. Johnson. And Luther Johnson worked with Muddy Waters quite a bit back in the 60s. So Luther's still working, still alive, still strong, wonderful singer, wonderful lead guitar player. And he attracts a lot of the top musicians also to come and sit in with him. He works in the southern New England area a lot more, although he's done concerts in Vermont back in the early 2000s, late 1990s, and very amazing man. So.
You're watching LCA TV Channel 15 in Colchester, Vermont. Today we have the honor and the pleasure to be talking to one of the superstars of this beautiful state. His name is Dennis Wilmot, and his band is Left Eye Jump. We will be back. Don't change the dial. I've covered lots of space, but I never found anybody who could take your place. Nah, that ain't it, woman. Hey, baby, I need your love. Won't you please tell me who you thinking of? Yeah, I realize now, darling, that I have done you wrong, but all I beg of you, honey, please, 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 bring your clothes back home. I've got in it. What the truth is, oh baby, I need your love. Hey, baby, baby, won't you please tell me who you're thinking of?
you home now, baby, in an Eldorado too. Oh, but you know nothing that I do, woman, ever take the place of you. Now that ain't it, baby. Hey, baby, I need your love. Baby, won't you please still move you thinking of oh.
I do want to mention a couple more of the musicians who have profoundly influenced me while I've been in Vermont as an adult. And Jeff Salisbury is one of the drummers that everybody would want to work with. And he's a master drummer. He has a book on drumming technique. He's been a professor and invited guest to some of the large drum councils where people come from all over the world. He's a magnet for great musicians. Paul Asbell, a guitarist whose depth is just unfathomable. He has worked with many of the great Chicago bluesmen and grew up in Chicago. He has set so many people on the right track by his inspired playing and by his role as teacher and mentor. And there are people out there, including Trey Anastasio from the band Fish, who were mentored by Paul.
Yes.
Another one is Nick Casarino, who is with the Ninth Power and is touring all over the United States. Paul has helped me, mostly shaking me up and making me change the shape of my hands so I would learn some real chord substitutions and not be so rigidly locked into my usual thing. And I deeply appreciate his efforts. One other great musician I only have gotten to play with a couple of times, but he worked with my band once, is Dave Grippo, another mentor to many, many horn players, and also has toured, nationally and done some important work, but great saxophonist, great musician, great inspiration to many. Last, but certainly not least, is Dwight Richer of Dwight and Nicole. And they are really now on the cusp of having a great, great experience as nationally known musicians. And I call Dwight the most dangerous guitar player I've ever worked with, and he continues to influence me. We started to play just for a few minutes the other day, in 2.5 hours, the two of us were going like this at the end, His rhythm work is astounding. He has the most beautiful voice. His partner, Nicole, she is available to everybody who can let her in. The emotion, the connection with the audience, and the true love that she projects. But back to Dwight, he turned me on to some great blues musicians that I hadn't heard before. And one of them was Johnny Guitar Watson.
We're going to do a little rumba for the people at home, thinking about all of those folks down in the Gulf states. Maybe this will help dry it out down there a little bit. Won't you tell me, pretty baby, darling, where you get it from? Won't you tell me, darling, oh darling, where you get it from? Got it from your lover, on your sweet sugar plum. Baby, you look so good, you act so fine. Why don't you move a little closer, baby, you're mine, all mine. One more time, let's have a little bit of wine. Going down, oh, the sun's coming up. We're sitting right here at LACTV, drinking gin from a paper cup. I look at you, you look at me, you say, we ain't in church, but we should be. Oh, Saturday night turned into Sunday morning. Now my baby was looking at me, but you gave me a warning. I said, now what's the matter, baby? I just can't see. She said, we ain't in church, but we should be. Baby, oh baby, why don't you get inside? I'm gonna take you out to the country, for a Cadillac ride. Oh, but when the evening's all over, we're still gonna need a place to hide. Baby, oh baby, before I go, I'll be back at 7 o'clock, honey. Take you out to a picture show. But when the movie's all over, we've still got a long, long way to go.
I would like you to speak a little bit about the way you communicate with people, because you are very emotionally thinking. Your band is maybe 5 or 6 or 7 people, depending on what you can bring to stage.
Yes.
But you cannot be put in a little box. You got a big band of rock and roll, blues, everything is oil.
Yes.
And when you turn on the engine, what comes out is really wonderful.
Well, that's very gratifying to hear. I mean, certainly that's our goal. And I tell you, the way the communication with the audience goes, I mentioned my mother had been an actress. My father was a painter. And when we were small children, my brother and I, my mother could read stories to us, and she had a voice for every part. And she didn't hold back. And of course, the result was we could be laughing as the storyline went along, or crying if there was something sad in the story. But it was all about having the emotion available, and not in a reserved way, in an authentic way. And as I got going in the 90s and began to really play in front of audiences, I became very aware that making that connection, that being intimate with them, as much as they're willing to have me, was the most important thing I could do. Maybe I'd be the person who would be the catharsis for whatever emotion they were feeling, good, bad, or indifferent. And it was on me to do that. So with the background that I had, the example that I'd had, especially from my mother, her beautiful voice when she was singing, I just started doing that. I just started making those connections. Having the musicians who could really bring to the table the dynamics, the correct feel, was of course the huge component in that.
I'd like to introduce the band at this time. My saxophone player extraordinaire, Joe Moore, a man who's so much in demand all around this area. Fantastic. Man has been with me since 1999. Long, tall Bill Darrow on the lead guitar. And back here on the bass, a man who's worked for me for so many years, with me, helped me, coached me, Kenny B. Yes, indeed. My name is Dennis. The name of the band is Left Eye Jump.
Who's the drummer?
Oh, keeping us on time all the time, every time. The Sultan of Snare, Sir Jeffrey Salisbury. Jeffrey Salisbury without feedback. By Joe, me got to go, me on my own. Me got to go that road down the bayou. Hey, my Yvonne, the sweetest one on me on my own. Son of a gun, we're gonna have that big fun on the bayou. That jungle live raw fish pie, filet gumbo. But tonight I'm going to see Mama Cheramio. I picked guitar, filled fruit jar, and Miguel. Oh, son of a gun, we're gonna have that big fun on the bayou. Willie! Buzzing, kinfolk come to see Yvonne by the dozen. Their step in style go all wild on me, oh my. Oh, son of a gun, they're gonna have that big fun on the bayou. Said Thibodeau and the Fontenot, the place is buzzing. Kinfolk come to see Matt Yvonne by the dozen. Their dress in style go all wild on me, oh my. Oh, son of a gun, they're gonna have that big fun on the bayou. Billy Gumbo. 429, I'm gonna see Mama Seraphine. I feel guitar, feel blue jaw in the gale. Oh, son of a gun, we're gonna have that big phone on the byway. Oh, son of a gun, we're gonna have that big phone on the byway. Oh, son of a gun, we're gonna have that big phone on the byway. Yeah.
Many viewers would like to know why you came about with the name of Left Eye Jump.
All right, Left Eye Jump, I suspect, was a sort of colloquial, popular form of like a hidden language.
Yes.
And you know, as we know, a lot of the American development happened on top of the appropriation of slaves from Africa. Those people were held under the thumb of plantation owners, often in peril for their own lives. You know, they had to really behave a certain way. And a code language came out of that. I think Left Eye Jump was probably, you know, something that was part of that code lexicon, probably around the time of the Civil War. A lot of the communication and these little couched phrases happened when people were out in the field working and they wanted to sing or talk to each other or get some gossip going. And that was, they'd call across several rows of plantings. You know, they say, well, when your left eye jump and your flesh begin to crawl. And then the tagline to that is, that's a sure sign, buddy. Now the mule is kicking in your stall. Another mule kicking in your stall. Well, if your left eye starts to twitch and your flesh begins to crawl, that's a sign, you know, like a witch doctor sign, you know, that somebody's messing with your wife or your lover, your husband, whatever, you know. And you better start paying attention, you know. Or here comes the overseer, and he wants to get your wife, you know. So anyway, that kind of thing was rampant in that language. Left Eye Jump has a bit of humor in it, and the first blues hit makers back in the early 1900s were women. They were getting recorded early on. Bessie Smith, of course, was one of the big ones. Ma Rainey, Ida Cox, you know, those ladies. And the men were taking a look and saying, hey, they're making some money. You know, why should I stand behind a mule all day plowing these furrows, or why should I chop cotton all day for 75 cents a week when I could be making $3 playing for 2 hours on a Saturday night? And lines like Left Eye Jump, flesh begin to crawl, you know, I'm a crawling king snake baby. Those were the coin of the realm in lyrics. Lyrics kept a rather elastic feel. As one blues singer borrowed from another, they would change the way the verses went. But they all knew what they were talking about, and so did their listeners. And there was a lot of humor in it, and sometimes a lot of danger in it. The band, at the time it started, as I said, Dan Whalen was the first lead guitar player. And occasionally he'll still make a trip up here from the Boston area and play with me. One of the really best blues stylists I've ever heard, and most accomplished. Really, really astounding player. He's now finally retired from his day job, and so I may get to see a little bit more of him. He said, let's name the band Left Eye Jump, when we were looking at a bunch of names. And the second he said it, I said, that's it. I know it. You're right. And it's been Left Eye Jump since 1997.
We're gonna do a song. It's really a favorite of mine, written by the great Lowell Fulson. It's called Reconsider Baby. He had a big hit off of it. Lowell Fulson was a great and inspiring musician out of Oklahoma. He's no longer with us, but his songs are lucky for us. Here we go. Key of G, huh? For so long now, baby, how I hate to see you go. For so long now, honey, how I hate to see you go. In the way that I'll miss you, well, I guess you'll never know. We've been together so long now, baby, to have to separate this way. We've been together so long now, honey, to have to separate this way. I'm gonna let you go head on, baby. Pray you come back home someday. Well, you said you once have loved me. Now I guess you changed your mind. Oh, you said you once have loved me. Now I guess you changed your mind. I'm gonna let you reconsider, baby. Give our love just a little more time. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So thank you very much.
I am so glad, Tony,
Oh,
that
I
you gave
am
me
so
this
glad.
opportunity.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure.
I'm
You
so
are
glad.
giving us the opportunity. Good. So let's say, when I was a child in Havana, Cuba, I learned that the radio was like the newspaper of the air, the television too. So we are here in Colchester, Vermont, and we are coming to you from Colchester. LCA TV, Channel 15 today with Donald Wilmot and also Left Eye Job. Great guys, and they are all strong masters of the blues. Thank you very much for watching our show.
back.